Y'all know him really well. Yeah, he preached his first sermon right here. Yeah, yeah. I got 4 grandkids. That's what most people say. Yeah. Well, he's good too. You all may or may not be aware of Isaac and Olivia had another transplant. They've been having they've had trouble having children, and they did an embryo adoption. Did he explain that to you? Because I didn't know what it was. People that have trouble having children, couples will make them like in a test tube, and you end up with like 6 or 8 or 10 or 12, and they only put 1 or 2 or 3 in the mom, and they've got these leftovers, and so you can adopt them, and it's like a regular adoption. They get to kind of pick you, and you have to have a home study and things like that, and you have to pay money, and then they implant them in this case Olivia. The first time they implanted 3, and none of them made it. And I get emotional about that because they want children so bad. So the second time, they implanted 3, and 1 made it, which is Elias. And out of that same batch, the same family, there was 2 left. And they've implanted 2 recently in Olivia. And so far, she's got the morning sickness and all that. And so that's good. Yeah, I feel bad for her, but I'm happy. We don't know if it's 1 or 2, but they will be his biological sibling. But, he's not related to me blood-wise or Isaac or Olivia, but he'll have hopefully a brother or sister or 2 might be born. So they just had that done, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And so we're hoping for some extra grandkids. We have 3 in Texas. Yes, Elias. Yes, but they want 6 or 7 children. So Jameson, they need to talk to you all first, especially if they get twins this time. I'll see if they still want to get that many. But they want to go through regular adoption after this, and so they may adopt a little Korean girl that's a year old or something. I don't know, because we'll have a lot of different. We'll take them all and love them just as much. But her, Olivia's father and uncle were adopted. Their family heritage and stuff. That has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but when we're baptized, we're all adopted into the family of Christ. But we're going to talk about Gideon today, an unlikely hero. Have you studied Gideon recently? Okay. You never know when you go somewhere. I went somewhere and spoke on something, and they had just talked about it the week before, and I'm like, I'm sorry, that's the only notes that I brought. But as I get older, my memory is terrible. I just can't remember stuff. So okay. And I'm only 56. So, wait till I get to, whatever. We were at a wedding last night, and I was talking to a fella, and he did not look 90 at all. My folks are 9, and I figured he was about that. And he's 90 years old. And I was thinking, I don't think I'm going to make it that far. My body is torn up and everything. And after the wedding, they play some music and they do, sort of some dancing, like, I don't know, line dancing, I'll call it. There's some moves. You're supposed to put your right foot and then live it. I didn't do it at all because I have all this numbness from my autoimmune diseases and stuff. But I was helping clean up and was carrying about 3 things, not drunk everything out of it, and I was going to dump them out. Well, somehow or another, I stepped on the trash can lid, and it scooted, of course. And I can't feel my feet very well, almost none, because of the autoimmune. Well, I went flying across the dance floor with these drinks and spilled them everywhere, and ended up laying flat on my back. So technically, I was on the dance floor last night. I was laying out like that, but anyway, it was concrete. It was a wedding barn, but. I'm not. I'm very stiff a lot. Anyway, it had nothing to do with that. I do have a little sore elbow. Was the only thing that sore from that fall. But not to complain. But My weight is a problem. That makes my knees worse, but I have bad knees, and I have the two autoimmune diseases that wreak havoc with you in different ways. Well, I have Sjogren's syndrome, which is dry eyes and dry mouth, but also they keep saying I have multiple sclerosis. Yeah, but whenever they do the tests, it's not officially that because I don't have the lesions on the brain. They do the spinal tap, and it doesn't show what's. I've been all the way to Johns Hopkins, University, and they took nodules from the inside of my lip, and somehow they can tell stuff from that. And they can't figure out what it is by name, and so then they say, well, it's fibromyalgia. Well, it's lupus. We don't know what it is, but it's a cousin of all of those. It'll kill you, but you might end up on a walker or a wheelchair or something like that. So as long as I can go, I'll keep going. But we were discussing earlier, I really need to lose weight. That would help. But no, she wasn't telling me that. I don't know how that came up, but I was saying that. Okay, no, she didn't. She didn't tell me to do it, but everybody knows I would feel better. It would be more healthy if I. Is this on Facebook? Oh man. Okay. Good morning. Glad y'all are here. We actually hadn't even got started in the lesson yet, so you all timed it just perfectly. If you want to tag along, it's in Judges chapter 6 through 8, and we probably won't get anywhere near done because of all the talking that I did. But the history of the situation is we're talking about Gideon. The Midianites and the Amalekites are kind of in control of the land right now, and they are stealing the Israelites' stuff. And so if you have a crop, they'll come and take your crop, or most of it. If you got some cattle or sheep or whatever, the Midianites are coming and taking it. And Midian was, did anybody know who he was? I had forgotten this, who he's related to. He's actually a son of Abraham by Abraham's second wife. A lot of people don't remember that either. Her name was Keturah. Also, Joseph, if we remember, when he was sold into slavery, that was to the Midianite people later on. Moses, when he went to the wilderness and was a shepherd, he married a Midianite woman. And right before the Israelites went into the promised land, they fought the Midianites. So there's a long history there. They're of the same people. They're of Abraham, but they don't get along. And so you remember Deborah and Barak or Barak or however you say it, and Jael. She was the lady who took the tent peg and nailed the guy and nailed it through his head. And so they had overthrown the Canaanite oppression. So for about 40 years, the land had rest. But then for 7 years now, they have been under the control of the Midianites. And of course, it's a cycle in the Old Testament. They follow the Lord for a while, a judge comes along, and they fall away from the Lord, a judge comes along and delivers them from it. And they, we're going to follow the Lord. And then another generation, and they're not anymore again. So we're in one of those cycles. I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to have to skip some of this stuff. But in 1 Corinthians, it says that God chooses the weak things, the things which are despised, God has chosen, so that no flesh should glory in his presence. And so instead of choosing the biggest and the best armies and the strongest men and all that, God often chooses the unlikely people, the weakest and so on, to do his work. So that way God gets the glory. The other person can't boast and say, well, that it was because of us. So, and I don't know what you usually do. If you want to ask questions, just raise your hand, or if you want to correct whatever I say, or if you want to tell me I need to lose weight, you can speak up and tell me whatever. Let's see, I've kind of set that up there. By the way, the Amalekites are also related to the Israelites. Amalek was Esau's firstborn son. And so they became a tribe, and they lived kind of southeast of the land of Canaan. And they also would often fight. And the Israelites were supposed to obliterate them, when they went into the promised land and got rid of them. And they didn't. And so they were a thorn in their side all the time because they didn't do that. These people, Midianites and Amalekites, would destroy, well, the sustenance for Israel. They would destroy their sheep, their ox, their donkey, and there wasn't anything left. And if you watch the news, which I try not to, Russia is kind of doing this to the Ukraine right now. They're taking their wheat, they're taking some of their people even and shipping them back to Russia. And so it's kind of a modern day situation like they're facing back then. And so they cry out to the Lord. And so the Lord picks somebody, but he doesn't pick the tall, handsome like Saul the king, the guy who was a head taller than everybody else and good looking and all that. Apparently David was a good looking guy too, but when he was chosen, he was a little fella, okay? And so in Judges 6:11, the angel of the Lord comes and sat under the terebinth, which is in Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abizarite. I don't know how you say that. And his son Gideon threshed wheat in the winepress in order to hide it from the Midianites. How do you thresh wheat? Does anybody ever do that? No.
Maybe on a rock or something like that, break them loose.
Yeah, and then air and let the wind blow the chaff away and stuff like that. They usually do it on a hilltop, which makes sense. But if you do it on a hilltop and they see you doing it, the Midianites are going to, oh, hey, he's got some wheat. I'm going to go steal it. So he was down in a wine press, which is a low area where you stomp on the grapes. You ever think about that? I don't know if these things have been stomped with feet or not, but in the olden days, and I guess still in California, they'll do that. And in France, they'll make wine that way. Anyway, so he was down in a low place hiding from the Midianites and trying to thresh wheat down there. And so the angel of the Lord, in verses 12 and 13, appeared to him, the Lord, and says, the Lord is with you, you mighty man of valor. Okay, Gideon is not a mighty man of valor. He doesn't think anyway, because he's hiding from the Midianites. And so he's probably looking around going, who are you talking to? Me? And then he goes on to say that I'm the least in my father's house. And our part of the tribe of Manasseh is the weakest. Now, it could be weakest as in they don't have a lot of men that fight. It could be spiritually they're weak. I don't know, because his father Joash was an idolater. What's the word? And so it could be weak that way. Gideon kind of gives the angel some complaints there. Why are bad things happening to us? We're supposed to be God's chosen people, right? And if God is so great, where has he been? Where are these miracles that I've heard my ancestors talking about, that he did to them? I don't see any miracles right now. And it says, where are his miracles which our fathers told us about? Did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has forsaken us, delivered us into the hand of the Midianites. And so do we ever question God like that? Why me? Why do or why does my family member have cancer? Why did this catastrophe happen to me? I was telling Shub Roy, I was doing mission work. I was taking a truckload of stuff to Nashville on Friday, and my truck conked out about the Tennessee line. And so I missed this month's shipment because they were shipping it out on Saturday. And my truck is full of boxes, and I had tarp over it, drove through terrible rains, and I had it towed back to Glasgow to Don Franklin Auto. Are you all familiar? Okay, they're members of the church, if you didn't know that, in Columbia. And Dad preached in Columbia for a while, and so I had it towed to one of their dealerships, a Chevy dealership. I have a Chevy truck. And so I was like, why? Why all this rain, Lord? Why is it so hard for me to get there? And then why did my truck, and this stuff's going to take a whole nother month to get to the villagers? I'm not doing something bad. So sometimes we question God. And so we give God an earful of complaints. And that's what Gideon did right to the angel of the Lord. But we try to blame others. Why were the Israelites in the situation they were in? They compromised what?
Because they're compromising before all this time up.
Right. God. They were doing what they wanted to do, and they were following the people around them and their idols and worshiping them and intermarrying with them and so on. And so we need to not blame others if it's our fault. You know, a lot of times we're in financial trouble and it's because of us. Or, you know, I'm fat. I can't blame Shelby Roy. I can blame Deb because she's a good cook. But I weigh a lot because it's my fault. Okay, I can't blame anybody else. I could blame my ancestors. My dad's heavy. My grandfather, great grandfather, he was even bigger than me. But it's not that way. So Gideon was afraid, and even though he was called this mighty man of valor, he doesn't think that he's the guy that's going to be the deliverer of Israel. So in verses 14 through 18, the Lord turned to him and said, "Go in this might of yours, and you shall save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Have I not sent you?" And so the Lord tells all of us to make disciples, to go and teach. We all need to do that. I kind of happen to go to South America in Guyana, and some people pat you on the back and think you're a little better. No, I'm not. All of us are supposed to do that. And you can do it right next door. That's a dentist office, I think. You can take your materials that you got and put it in the waiting room at the dentist office. You don't have to stand there and preach. They probably kick you out. But while you're getting your teeth worked on, here, talk to the dentist and tell him, about God. They can understand you. My wife worked at the dentist office, and they can actually understand you when they have those tools in your mouth. So we are to preach the gospel wherever we're at. So you got family members, right, that aren't members. You got coworkers. You got neighbors, people standing in line at Walmart or Dollar General. And I'm a big talker. I'll talk to anybody. I'll ask anybody questions. So I'll say, hey, my son preaches at the, Church of Christ up here. You're invited. Come on up. Or we're having vacation Bible school. Or I'm standing at the gas pump, and I'll talk to people. Now, have I baptized anybody at the gas pump? No. But I'm planting seeds. That's what we need to do. I was talking to a fellow last night that goes to Guyana, and I get emotional. I'm sorry. And they were in a particular place, and a guy paddled his boat 4 hours up the creek or down the creek to get to worship. And then he'd have to wait. It's near the Caribbean Ocean. The Essequibo is a big river like the Mississippi. And so the tides happen. And so he would wait for the tide to come up to where he could paddle back, upstream. And it's another 4 hours. And they said, well, how many people live up there? We weren't even aware of it. Well, there's people that, dotted the houses all along that creek. So they established a congregation up through there, built a building about 4 years ago. And I'd actually show you that in a minute on the slides. And this fella's son was baptized and became a preacher. But the guy that got all of this going, was like, hey, there's people that live up there. We're going to work. He never was baptized until recently. Finally, in his older age, he was baptized. So that seed was planted a long time ago. And because of people's, not ingenuity, what am I trying to think of? They were inspired to work in that area. And finally, years later, that seed materialized and that fellow got planted or got baptized. So don't give up. So Gideon was afraid, and he says his clan is the weakest. The Lord says, surely I will be with you. And the Lord's with us all the time too, even if we don't think about it. You shall defeat the Midianites. If now I have found favor in your sight, Gideon says, then show me a sign. You remember what the signs are? That he. Yeah. Yeah. It's I think it was, which was first, it was wet and the ground was dry, and that wasn't good enough. He said, well, give me one more sign tomorrow night and it'll be dry and the ground all way wet around it. And so after that, he thinks, well, maybe I'm satisfied. Maybe I am this little guy, but God has chosen me to do something great. So do we ever limit God Excuse me. Do we ever?
Yes.
Yeah, like how?
By convincing ourselves or sanctifying ourselves, or some things God can't do because science says this, or because logic says this, or man says this. And so we don't even bother taking it to God because we limit God or put him in this little box.
Yep. I mean, didn't God create the universe in 6 days? He can do anything, and he's right by our side. On the way here, there was a motorcycle, I won't say gang, but, they looked like some rough characters. But, if you stopped at a Quick Mart, and there was probably 16 of them, they were in pairs, and then they pull up, you might feel a little uneasy or something. Well, we limit God by not taking the gospel to them. We think, they're got tattoos, they get wearing leather. They're not going to listen to God. They don't go to church because they're out driving on Sunday. They're not going to listen to me. We're limiting God. Give it a shot. Talk to them. Strike up a conversation. Give them a piece of literature. Tell them about your website. Tell them about your YouTube channel. There's lots of ways, even without physically preaching from a pulpit, there's lots of ways to present the gospel. So don't limit God. Yes, ma'am.
I limit God by the things I do wrong, and then I think I did it, so I try to carry it and not give it to God to take care of it.
Yeah.
So I limit him because I'm healed.
Well, yes. I don't know if everybody can hear and hear real well. Repeat it. Okay. She says she limits God by when she messes up, and then she feels the guilt from that. But do you ask for forgiveness? Okay. Well, does God remember that anymore?
It's embarrassing, I guess, he does God. But yeah, I do. And I know that's the only way. But I think a lot of times even the smallest thing that we feel like we've done wrong, we don't always take it to God to figure it out.
And that's one of the biggest things that limits people coming to church and getting like that.
Yeah.
Well, when I get my life together, when I get this straight, when I get that straight, that's one of the biggest things that's in people.
Or when my kids get older and they're not fussy, then I'll bring them to church. Well, now they're in sports. When after they get out of sports and stuff and practices things, then I'll bring them to church. And then all of a sudden now they're 20 years old and they've never been in church. So we limit God in that way. But when we ask for forgiveness, it's gone. I mean, God doesn't remember it anymore. Now, if you offended a person or sinned against somebody, they're probably going to remember it. And there may be some consequences there or embarrassment, like you said. But give it to God. If you've got troubles, he's listening. He's a lot.
Deb and I talk about it all the time. People talk about global warming and this problem and this problem and this problem. And we just say to ourselves, God's in control. He's on his throne. This earth will last until God says that's it. And don't matter, we may bounce stuff around, as Winston Churchill said with our nuclear weapons, but God is in control. And it will cease to exist the second God decides that it will exist. And that shows a lot of worry out of my life because there's been problems ever since the world began.
Yeah.
There'll be problems until the second that it ends. There will be problems. And some of those problems are hard. But God, when God says it's over, it will be, and it will not be over until then.
And who's going to win in the end?
God.
We know God's going to win. So which team do you want to be on? God's team or Satan's team? The world or God? So if you know the ending, you want to be on that team. And if I don't bet, but if you knew the outcome of a ball game, that's a safe bet. Well, it's a safe wager, whatever, that if you do what God wants, you'll end up in heaven. And you said something else there that sparked something, and I forgot what it was. Oh, yeah, Bert Payton. Do you know him? He preaches over in Lawrenceburg. Yeah. And sometimes I get, I don't know how to say it exactly, but he is so calm. I mean, the worst things in the world can happen, and he's just happy-go-lucky, and, God's in charge. I'm like, how can you say that? The whole economy is affected or whatever it is, or school shootings or stuff like that. And he's like, calm as a cucumber. They say that. Are cucumbers really calm? Does anybody know? Has the government spent $4 million on a study for that? Wasted money? Probably have. So I worry about that, government waste and stuff. And Bert's like, whatever. So I need to be more like him, and he's of course trying to be like Christ. So if we're dependent upon God and we partner with God, then we can see ourselves through his eyes. He saw Gideon not as this weak, scared farmer, but as the guy who was going to deliver Israel. And so he called him a mighty warrior. You know, if he calls you, you know, a Christian and a soldier for Christ and all that, then we are, or we should be. You know, and we don't limit ourselves. We become that soldier. So when do I have to quit? Quarter after. Okay. So Gideon went and prepared a goat and some food. And remember, food is scarce because the other people are taking all their food. And so he's going to give food to this angel of the Lord. Well, the angel of the Lord doesn't eat it. He puts it on a rock, puts his staff out, and burns it up as an offering. And so that precious food, you know, became an offering. And we need to also give our best to God. You know, our time, our resources, you know, whatever we have, don't give God the seconds. Don't watch a bunch of TV and then, oh man, well, I got to read about 15 minutes before class this morning. You know, that's not giving God our best. So, all right. So he offered the sacrifice. So that's another miracle that he sees. Gideon's got one more sign there. And so the messenger, okay, so he wasn't sure if this was a messenger from God exactly. And so he was asking for these signs and so on. So was it a messenger of God? Yes. Whether Gideon thought so or not, okay? So our perception doesn't really matter. When God says something, that's the way it is. Even if we don't see it yet or don't understand it yet, that's the way it is. And so Gideon finally kind of understood, okay, this is the person from God. I've seen these miracles. And I guess I am the chosen instrument to save Israel, like he was saying. So that same night, so it wasn't weeks and weeks of preparation and getting up his courage. That same night, he went and tore down his father's idols and took a bull and sacrificed it. He made it an altar for the Lord and sacrificed it. But he did it at night. He didn't do it during the day. He wasn't quite bold enough to do that yet. And so he does it at nighttime. The next morning, the townsfolk see this and said, who did this? Well, what happened? And they find out that it was Joash's son, Gideon. And so they want to kill him, you know, because he tore that down. Do you remember what they said, or what Joash he said? Did he say, kill my son, or did he defend his son? It's okay, I didn't remember either. What? Yeah, you know, this is an idol here, and if it's a god, he can defend himself. So don't kill my son. Let the idol, let Baal do it. Okay, and so that's where he got the nickname Jerubbaal, because he contended against Baal, and so he got a nickname there in a good way. So what causes us sometimes to be afraid? He was afraid to do anything, and then he was afraid to do it during the daytime. He reluctantly finally did what God told him. What causes us to be afraid to do things? Afraid of what people say, our reputation.
Afraid of the consequences. A lot of times we don't act out because we're afraid we'll get in trouble at work, or maybe fired at work, or whatever. And so we don't obey because of that fear.
Right. Well, sometimes it is known. I mean, if it's in the handbook that you can't do something. My wife's a school teacher. They often ask her to do things that she doesn't want to do, and she doesn't do them. So technically, I guess she could be fired. You know, she's not going to teach about gay rights and all that stuff and other things, and you know, recreational drugs are okay, and other stuff that they want her to say. So, you know, she could be fired, but she sticks with what she's, you know, what she knows is right. So Gideon seems to believe now, with all these signs and stuff, that he really is the chosen guy. He,
With all of this, it's a lack of faith.
yeah,
We fret about things that we don't know about because we don't have faith in God. And we don't understand who the living God is. increase our faith. We need to pray for more faith. And we need to get closer to God. And we need to find out that God was victorious in every single instance he chose to be victorious. And he will be victorious in every single instance he chooses to be from now to the end of time.
Yep.
And the final victory will be when he says that's it. And that's all you know. That's the ultimate victory.
Has
We just have our faith in that.
we got to have deeper faith? Has God ever reneged on a promise or not followed through on a promise? They all come true. Jesus hasn't come back yet. We're waiting on that one promise, but yeah, because everything else was fulfilled. So we have that hope, and not just hope. We don't maybe use the word hope in the right way, but we have that assurance, yes, that God is coming back. I mean, God is with us, and Jesus has come back here, and I'm with God. Sunday morning, watching TV, watching the internet. God doesn't seem so close to me. Did God move? Did God change? No, but my thinking or my perspective, or I moved away from God. So we need to be, obviously, with God all the time. So Gideon feared his neighbors, he feared his enemies, and he had a perceived lack of ability. He thought he was inadequate to do this. So he calls an army together. I got just a little bit of time. And you know this part of the story probably. 32,000 men show up. That's a lot. I see these little Civil War encampments, and you got a few guys, and 32,000 of them. How do they feed them? Where do they go to the bathroom? Just stuff like that. But they got any horses and things? I don't know. And so 32,000 show up. But you know how many the enemy had? 120,000. And then they had 15,000 that had chariots and horses. 135,000 versus 32. What did God say? Got too many. What were you be thinking if you're Gideon? Like, I'm glad that somebody came at all, And so they said, whoever's afraid, you can go home. 22,000 of the 32,000 admitted they were afraid. And I don't know if they went home. In studying, I think they actually went back to the base camp because the next events happened that night. So they didn't have time to get all the way home. I always thought they had gone home. But anyway, so he's got 10,000. Then what does God say? Still too many. Okay? It's 10,000 versus 132. I don't know what's population of the county here. What is it? How many? 24. Okay. So that many were scared and left. The whole county left. And you got 10,000 people. So how many is in Garrett County? I don't know. Probably a little more. I think it's like 17 or something. So you got a little less than everybody in Garrett County left. God says that's too many. And so he takes them to a creek or a stream or a well and says, anybody that laps it up like a dog, and I read that, a dog's tongue, actually makes a cup and brings it into its mouth like that. And that's what these guys were doing. They weren't actually, like a dog. Probably. They were probably picking it up like this and looking around, and they were on guard while they were doing it. And the other guys got down in the water and on their knees and stuff like that. I don't know if there was a real reason, if it was a military thing, like these guys were prepared and the other ones weren't. It's just how God chose to separate them. And so how many has he got now? 300. 300 versus 132,000. 135,000, I think. Anyway, it's about 450 to 1, the odds. And so you have to kill 450 of them. You have to kill 450. You have to fight 450 people. It's not possible. But God wanted it that way because it wasn't Gideon that was going to win. It wasn't the 300. It's God.
And it shows it very fast. Fear and cowardice is a cancer. It'll run through a congregation or an army or anything. So the first thing is, let's cut this cancer out so it doesn't spread to everybody else. And then the next thing is, you got people who's really hard-headed or don't know what they're doing. Those were the ones that were down on their belly. They weren't paying attention to what was going on. Let's get there, y'all. Let's get down to the real, true men of soldiers and men of men, and we'll take those.
That's true. I read that fear can spread through the platoon or whatever. So as these other 9,700 are leaving, it said that they gave their jars and their torches and so on and so forth to the 300. So that's how they ended up with that many. And did they have Tupperware back then? No. Okay. So the jars were how they transported food, and after you got 32,000 people, that jar is probably empty. No food left in it. And so that's how they happened to have empty jars. We have a new family worshiping at Maple Avenue, and he just came back from 2 weeks of training for his annual, he's in Army Reserves. And I said, do they teach you tactics like that? Do you take a torch and a jar into battle, or do you defend yourself against that? And he goes, no, obviously not. And so God chose some strange stuff to win the battle. What have I got? 3 minutes? Okay. So what do? He splits into 3 groups. You got 100 each. They surround the camp. They're in a valley. They pick in the middle of the night, the watch, the people that are guarding the camp are leaving, and some more are coming to take their place to guard. And so that's when God tells them to attack or break the jars. Torch. Yeah, they're surrounded. Well, normally an army doesn't, not everybody's carrying a torch. And so one torch might represent 100 soldiers or something in the minds of the people in the valley. They hear the racket of the jars being broken, and they think the Israelites are already in our camp and they're stealing our stuff. And then you got the men coming back from watch, and you think they're the enemy. And so they all start fighting each other. And they got all those animals too for the chariots, and they're probably scared and running around, and it's just chaos. And they mostly kill each other, and Gideon and his men are up there. I guess they didn't really even have to fight. They're just watching the whole thing take place. That is amazing.
And I've often thought about that. We don't understand true God. Let's go from Andy
Or Guyana.
Around here, but in a war zone like that, and it's black dark, and you can't flip on a flashlight or a phone or anything like that. There's nothing available. It would be chaos.
I remember driving the antiques, we go out to the desert, and we drive around the top, but you're not allowed to turn headlights on. And so you've got your little night vision goggles, which is a blessing you're taking to have. But you're trying to drive through, and we have people drive off wadis and cliffs all the time.
Oh.
Because you just can't see. But you're trying to drive at night. You got tanks going everywhere. It's really hard to think.
Well, I hadn't really thought about the pitch black part, except for the, torches around. But another thing that was mentioned was they're not of the same. They're Midianites and Amalekites and a couple other groups. They had different languages. And so they're all chaos there too. They're not speaking the same language necessarily. And so we can explain it away, but it doesn't matter. God did what he did, whether or not we understand it, what happened. So in chapter 11 of Hebrews, what do we call that?
Heroes Hall of Fame.
Yeah, Heroes Hall of Fame or Hall of Faith. You got the Baseball Hall of Fame, the best of the best. And you got faith. And who's in there? Gideon. He's one of the guys in there. And, he was this lowly guy, unlikely hero, and he was used. We don't have a lot of time left, but we don't always get to pick our time to shine. We don't always know when we're going to be the guy or the person. So we need to be ready, and we need to step up and not be afraid, not sit on the sidelines ourselves. We need to see ourselves as potential, who he wants us to be, who he's shaping us to be, not who we see in the mirror and, we look down upon ourselves. So he looks like he's ready to turn the switch off in there. So unlikely hero, 4 years ago, I had no idea I'd be doing mission work. There's lots of work God can do in this community with each one of you. Don't limit God. Step up, be ready, do his work. I heard an amen, so I guess that's time you can turn it off. Thank you all.